When I was 25, I went on a solo trip to Rio de Janeiro. My favorite DJ would be performing there that weekend, and it had always been a place I wanted to visit. As someone who had traveled alone many times before without incident, I felt comfortable with the idea. I stayed in an Airbnb just outside the city, a modern and comfortable one-floor house that was cozy, despite being a little more expensive than I would have liked. The first day was great. I unpacked, grabbed dinner, and headed to a rooftop venue to see the DJ perform. I met a couple, James and Jess, and we hung out the next day exploring the city's famous sights like Christ the Redeemer and Sugarloaf Mountain, followed by some beach time. Unfortunately, they had tickets for another show that evening, so I was left to continue my solo adventures, which I didn't mind at all. As evening approached and hunger set in, I made my way back toward the Airbnb, passing through an area with a variety of restaurants. I found a small, inexpensive spot with a menu that had some English on it, so I decided to dine there. The restaurant was narrow and dimly lit, with only a few patrons seated at tables further down. A man, about 50 years old, was seated next to mine, and I noticed he was the only other person dining alone. The waiter spoke to me in Portuguese, and I asked if he spoke English, which he did. After placing my order, I noticed the man watching me, which felt odd. He soon began speaking to me in English, complimenting my Portuguese. He seemed to think he was being charming, but it came across as creepy. I tried to act distracted, glancing at my phone, but he kept talking, sometimes in English, sometimes in Portuguese, offering unsolicited lessons. I politely responded, but inside, I was uncomfortable. When he told me how sexy I sounded speaking Portuguese, I just wanted him to stop talking. Eventually, the man stopped talking as he ate, and I finished my meal as quickly as I could. After I paid, I got up to leave, only for him to follow suit. Even more unsettling, he asked for the check right after I did, despite not having finished his meal. As I walked out, he said something in Portuguese, but I didn't respond, just said goodbye and left. It was dark now, and I walked back toward the Airbnb, trying to shake off the strange encounter. At an intersection, I noticed the man across the street staring at me. He quickly looked away, but I was already on edge. I kept checking behind me as I walked, but I couldn't spot him again until I reached the block where my Airbnb was. There, at the end of the street, I saw him standing by the corner, staring in my direction. My heart dropped. He had been following me. I quickly entered the house, locked the door, and shut all the blinds. I panicked and called my dad, explaining the situation. He advised me to stay alert and keep everything locked up. Later that night, I decided to go out to a bar in downtown Rio to try and unwind. I returned to the Airbnb after a couple of hours, tipsy but still cautious. As I entered the house, I noticed the kitchen window was open, one I had left closed before leaving. I immediately knew something was wrong. I called the emergency number and explained the situation in my broken Portuguese, managing to tell them about the break-in. The police arrived quickly, and I hid behind a bush across the street. They entered the house, and soon after, I saw them walk out with the man from the restaurant in handcuffs. My heart raced as I realized he had been the one following me. I felt a mix of disbelief, relief, and horror. If I hadn't acted quickly, who knows what could have happened? The police took him away, and I never saw his face again. I was relieved, but also shaken by how close I had come to a dangerous situation. I realized how important it was to lock all windows and be vigilant, no matter how safe a place might seem. The next day, I left Brazil feeling grateful to be safe, but also unsettled by the experience. I haven't returned since.